We are so excited to have on this episode of the podcast, all the way from sunny and warm Grand Forks, North Dakota. We have Jocelyne Lamoureu Davidson and Monique Lamoureu Mirando. How are you guys doing today?
We're doing good, just trying to stay warm here. It's pretty flippin' cold. So
I hear you. I hear you. I'm in upstate New York, and Jeff right now is in Florida. So screw you, Jeff.
Suck it.
Anyway, so we're so excited to have you guys on the podcast. We're huge fans of what you guys do, not only just in the hockey world and how you've elevated the women's game, but in your fight for equality for women as well, and gender equity. But before we do get into some of that stuff, what we'd love to do is ask you guys how you fell in love with the great game of hockey. Come from a bit of a family of royalty up there in North Dakota. And I didn't even realize this, but so your dad played at North Dakota. Your mom is an incredible marathon runner.
Yep.
You have 4 older brothers that played, one including that Jeff and I played junior hockey against. And Jeff, we were talking about beforehand, he's a goalie and can never freaking score on him. He was unreal. So talk to us a little bit about growing up in the Lamoureux household and how that allowed you guys to fall in love with this great game.
well, when we were growing up, we always wanted to take along with our brothers and do what they were doing. And the one rule that they had was we could play with them, but if we couldn't keep up, then we weren't allowed to play and we had to sit and watch. So from a really young age, we learned how to we just always had to work hard and put our best foot forward in order
We had to
keep
battle.
up. We had to battle. And they didn't take it easy on us, but we grew up, there was a pond across the street. We played on the pond growing up all the time. Our mom would blow the whistle 3 times when it was time to come up. Another family household had a cowbell that they would ring, so you would know who had to whose house was calling who. But yeah, we just grew up playing on the pond, no rules, no coaches, and I think that's how we really developed our love for the game.
That's awesome. Let me ask you guys this, because this is something that I think about a lot, because I train hockey players and I train one of your old teammates, Nicole Hensley, and unbelievable person, one of the best I've ever met in the world. But
I love Goalie Nation too.
Yeah. Well, she told me to ask you if you like your real kids better or your adopted kids, meaning her and somebody else. So
very close second.
I mean, she's unbelievable. But when do you think the really good female players should stop playing with the boys and transition just to the female game? Because I mean, I know that obviously you playing against boys a little bit stronger, mature differently, whatever, play the game differently. It obviously, I would think, had to help you. And maybe I'm speaking out of turn, answer to that also. But when should the best girls stop playing boys hockey?
So we've mentioned this a few times in the last couple of weeks as far as opportunities for young girls to play. So we didn't even have the opportunity or an option to play on girls teams. But what we've recognized or noticed through our national team career, in 2010, there was one player who grew up playing with boys, and she was a goalie.
No, playing with girls.
Sorry, playing with girls. Everyone else played with boys, and that one exception was a goalie. And then by 2018, it was about half and half. So I think there's more competitive opportunities for young girls to play at a high level. But I think we wouldn't necessarily trade the opportunity we had to play with boys. We competed. We were one of the best players on the teams year in and year out. And I would say once we got to bantams, and this is different now because we had checking and peewees, so we had 2 extra years of checking, but we played 1 year of bantams. And I would say that bantam year, it was more about defending ourselves and making sure we weren't getting lit up center ice, because we were probably about the same size now as we were then.
Yeah.
And then the guys were growing. I mean, there's players that'd be 6 feet tall trying to run us over. And so not that we were scared to get hit, but you're head on a swivel, basically making sure you don't get run over every shift.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're doing really well on a boys team, the other team takes notice, and
all the more reason they wanted to knock us over.
Yeah. But I think, and we both have our master's in kinesiology, but I did my thesis on when or if playing competitive boys hockey helps develop elite female hockey players. And the lessons or the skills learned from like a stick handling, knowing the game, shooting, speed, all players on the 2014 team, because I used our 2014 team to do my thesis, felt that playing boys helped their development into being an elite player. So I would say if you can keep up and be one of the better players and you're physically not, being pushed around, you continue to play with boys.
Yeah, I think it's really a case by case basis, but when we watch, like if you're watching like a U18 team or you're watching tryouts, you can usually tell like which girls have played boys hockey, just because there's just like that competitive edge you sometimes see, or that grit or that physical type of play. And so I think it might not be as obvious now and today, just because the game is just growing and developing and getting better and better every year. But yeah, I think it's definitely a case by case basis, and definitely probably where you're from geographically as well.
And I don't think it's beneficial if they're like on the lower half of the, depth chart of the boys team. I don't think that's necessarily great either.
So one of the things I talked about with Nicole when she came on our podcast, and I've talked about this with her quite a bit, like how can we get women's coaching or get the women to develop faster? Because it seems like when they play with boys, like you said, maybe it helps them develop faster. And something that she brought up is kind of a psychological thing, that she thinks that the coaches, whether they're males or females, coaching the girls' youth hockey, they take it easier on girls, is what she's noticed when she goes out to boys' practices and helps out coaching there versus young girls' practices. And she goes out and coaches there. She says that she kind of feels like the coaches treat the girls with kid gloves a little bit, but with the boys, they'll kind of get into them more. They'll get on them more. With the boys, they'll be like, that wasn't good enough. That wasn't fast enough. And with girls, they kind of treat them with kid gloves. And she's kind of like, why? We're all athletes out there. We're all trying to get better. And maybe that kind of brings the female development, hinders it a little bit. Have you noticed that throughout your time coaching, playing, all these things?
Yeah, again, I think it's kind of a case by case basis, and where you see, I think we definitely see it in Grand Forks, where the numbers, if you look Grand Forks, you assume it's it's a hockey town. You got University of North Dakota, and the numbers for the girls is actually kind of like it's disappointing. There's so many boys teams, and then there's barely enough to field just a full team for a girls team at one age group. And so I think when you have that disparity in communities, I think you're just trying to get people to sign up, but then you're not necessarily teaching them the fundamentals that the boys are being taught at that same age. And you're coaching a U15 team or helping.
Yeah, I'm helping out with a U15 team. And so that's bantam age. And so I try to think back, okay, what were we learning in bantams? What were like some basic, not just skills, but like basic systems, not to get them, to be robots, but like systems so they understand how to play the game. Mm-hmm. And I found that to be very challenging, that like even just basic lingo, like hockey lingo, is just not there. And I think that, that's from coaching, but I also think it's a little bit of, I think more boys are fans of the game, where what I've noticed is girls don't necessarily watch hockey outside of being in the rink. So I think there's a little bit of that too, just the boys being bigger fans of the game and having an NHL to watch or more college opportunities to go watch live. I think that's a big piece to this puzzle.
Yeah. But then you look at, like, we went to Shattuck, and that was not the case at Shattuck, like where there's a extremely high standard. And Coach Stafford, his first year coaching girls hockey was our first year that we went there. And the standard was, he coached us the same way he coached the boys. And like, if you're missing passes that you should be making and catching and whatever it is, like, that standard was set every single day, and he didn't take it easy on people. And so I think, like, when you look at elite programs, I think like the Chicago Mission, like I think we helped out with a practice a couple of years ago when we were doing a national team camp there, and like they ran a very high paced practice. And so I think it's just getting like the elite, I think the elite of the elite programs, they already have that standard, and then it's just bringing up the rest of the pool.
Yeah, well, the work that you guys are doing and the success that you guys have had is certainly going to raise that, and I'm sure has brought in a ton more fans into the game. So that's awesome. But I do want to go back to, you mentioned Shattuck, because even talking to this pre-show here, it's a special place for hockey players to go. And I wanted to read something to you, so I texted Alyssa Gallardi, who we know very well, and I know she was there at Shattuck. And it was just really cool. She said at Shattuck, we practiced at 7 a.m. and they, as in you guys, would be on the ice every day, 6:15, 6:30 a.m., getting extra work in, shooting pucks, working on edges, skating stride, passing, stick handling, you name it. They were working on it with a focus like you couldn't even believe every single day. Then you go to the weight room thinking you would get some extra work in, and guess who'd already be basically completing an entire workout? The Lambs. I literally don't think there was an opportunity for them to possibly work any harder or spend more time on their craft. I mean, I don't think there's any better compliment from a teammate than something like that, that you guys put your heart and soul into the team and into your guys' craft. And I wonder, because we talk about like passion development a lot when it comes to hockey, and kind of like the more you love the game, the more you're going to want to work at it. The more you work at it, the better you're going to be. And then you just kind of develop from there. So how was Shattuck? Because I know it was like this for other people too. Like, how was Shattuck a place that allowed you guys to really want to put in that kind of work? And I'm sure a lot of that, hard work came from your upbringing and things like that. But how was a place like Shattuck able to kind of coerce that and allow you guys to really flourish?
Well, I think Shattuck gave us the resources to do that. So I would say, it'd be pretty. If we found young girls with the drive that we had at a young age, we'd be like, wow, look at this girl go. But we've always had that drive, and we attribute that to our brothers, because they were training in the summers, and we would be in like 5th, 6th grade, and we're like, oh, I guess that's what we should be doing. And so we go shoot that, and our dad would inadvertently, I think, planted a seed in our minds, because we had a shooting tarp, and he'd get home from work, he'd be working all day or whatever, and he's, oh, did you shoot pucks today? And we'd be like, no, not yet. And he goes, oh, well, just remember, somebody somewhere else is getting better today. And we're like, so then we're thinking, we're like, oh crap, we better go shoot some pucks. So that like inadvertently like planted a seed that like, if we're not getting better, somebody is. Yeah. And I think going to Shattuck is just, it's, they have the hockey program, obviously, and then they have these centers of excellence. So basically everyone who goes to school there is really good at something. So you're surrounded by people who are passionate about what they do. They love what they do, and they want to excel at their craft. And so when we got to Shattuck, we had the morning practice, and you have open ice beforehand. And then it's like, oh, well, we might as well use the ice while we can. And I don't know, we literally got up early every single day and would get on the ice early. And we wouldn't just do the flippant, like skate around in a circle and shoot pucks. And, we got on the ice and had something, with a purpose, and wanted to work on something. But I think that's just been a underlying tone throughout our careers, that like the monotony of doing something like that day in and day out, year in and year out, like we enjoy it in a really weird way, because it's not really that glamorous fun. It's not that glamorous when you're doing it, but in a weird way, we really enjoy seeing the benefits when you look back over working on something for so long and how much better you can get.
That's awesome. And let me ask you this, because the fact that you guys are twins and you're able to do it together, I think has to be a huge part of that. And one of the things that Jeff and I talk about a lot on this podcast is like, you mentioned the monotony and how to become great at anything. Like, it's not always that fun. It's just doing the same things over and over every day. And so we talk about like, how do you make that fun? Like, how do you make development like that sexy, in a sense where it's like, again, it's not fun to do that, but having the chance to do that together and compete with each other. One of the things we also talk about too is like always having an accountability buddy. And you guys almost have a built-in accountability buddy being twins. Like, how much is your relationship and maybe holding each other accountable, maybe not want to let each other down? Because I'm sure there's some days that Monique, you wanted to go and Jocelyne didn't. And, you know, other days where it was the opposite. Like, how is your relationship added to helping make that monotonous a little bit more fun in your guys' development?
Well, I think to your point, yeah, we've always had each other. So it's always held us accountable. And I think we've always thought, well, if it was just one of us, then this would really suck. Like if we were just like going on the ice on our own. So like, it's the fact that we could always go on the ice and work on something, whether it was one time or just working on different types of passing sequences. And so you always had each other to work off of. And I think when you talk about the skill development piece, I don't know if there's a way to make it fun the way that when you just look at basic sports psychology and how you learn certain skill sets and breaking it down to having it become just automatic. Sometimes there's not really a way to make it fun other than just to keep doing it and being repetitive. And so I think having gone to school for that in a way is also like, hey, this is how you really learn a skill. And like literally this is how you learn it. This is how it becomes ingrained in how you move and it becomes automatic. Yeah. So like in knowing that just from like a textbook standpoint, I think it's like, okay, well, I guess that's just what we got to do to learn certain skill sets. And I remember in 2009, we were home. We had just made the national team going into the Olympic year. And our brother Pierre Paul came out on the ice with us and we were working on like catching hard backhand passes. And he was saying, he's like, this is an underrated skill to have and gets overlooked. Cause like how many times in the game do you see a player get a hard backhand pass and it just explodes off their stick? So like that's something that since like 2009, like we work on that like weekly, like different drills that we would do. And then you think like that when I scored the tying goal in the Olympic gold medal game, I caught a hard backhand cross ice pass from Kelly Panic to go on that breakaway. And to think like how many times we worked on a drill where we would catch a pass in neutral, like just a hard, crisp pass.
Like we would literally shoot pucks on each other's backhands.
Pucks. And so if it like, but that's how you like the repetitive drills that we would do. And just like we would work maybe like once or twice a week, you just always work on it. And then you see it come to life in games when you least expect it or in the biggest moments of your career. Yeah. And I think to go off that, like you acquire a skill and then you still have to stay sharp. You can't get away from the things that you learn things, you're able to then apply them, but you also have to go back and still, yeah, you don't have to work on them as much, but you still need to make sure you're staying sharp at those little things. So like before the Olympics, after we had made the team, we were getting back on the ice early when we had the opportunity. And those were the little things we went back to make sure that when it mattered most, we were sharp in just the littlest things.
Well, and you think about it too, like if you hadn't practiced that tiny little, quote unquote, unsexy skill of catching a pass on your backhand, you don't get to go in on that breakaway and score that massive goal. So for any of the kids listening or any of the coaches listening, like when you look at Instagram and all these accounts where they're jumping over tires and doing a hula hoop after jumping rope and flipping the puck up through their legs 7 times, like that stuff is fun. Yes. But you've got to focus on those little teeny tiny details that seem insignificant, but without focusing on that catching that pass on that backhand, maybe she doesn't go in on the breakaway and score the massive goal. Like the little things matter so much and you have to constantly do those.
Yeah. I mean, to your point, you see, so especially on Instagram today, you see so many different skills coaches that are popping up and you'll see a drill where a kid's working on like 10 different skills in one specific in like one rep. I'm like, hey, what are they actually getting out of that? Because they're probably thinking so much about like what's coming up next that they're not really putting the focus into like one specific skill. And so I think it's just, but that probably makes it more fun for kids to do certain things. And yeah, they're getting better at certain things, but are they really getting better at the things that are going to make them a better hockey player? Like instead of doing a drill that has like 10 things, they're like, are you working on catching bad passes, catching pucks in your feet, like get it, like the things that realistically happen in hockey games. But just a side note.
All good, all good. Well,
I love that.
how cool was it for you guys? And I want to ask you a couple different questions in this one thing, but like you got to play college hockey. You were at 1 year Minnesota, but then got to go home and play at the University of North Dakota, which must have been really, really cool. You know, your dad played there, brother, all that kind of stuff. You know, in this book tour that I'm sure you guys are doing with 9 million Zooms and all that kind of stuff going on, I'm sure a lot of the talk is going to be about what you guys are doing in terms of gender equity and leadership and all that, which I certainly want to get into. But I also want to get into, you guys were absolutely unbelievable hockey players. And you were 3rd and 5th all time in points in NCAA hockey history, 6 world championships. Vex, so I was looking at it today. Between you two guys, you had 550 points in 149 games in your college career. Not bad.
Now that we're retired, we can kind of be like, that's pretty good.
Well, that's a lot of points.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you guys, as like, you know, top 5, top 10 women's players of all time, I would put you in. And having the chance to play with each other for a majority, if not all of that time, I'm always very interested in chemistry. How do you develop chemistry on the ice with somebody? And I think it's something that as a coach, I'm always, you know, we're always tinkering with lines and how do you put the right people with the right people to kind of make it go. And I'm wondering, with all of the success that you guys have had, particularly with the points that you've put up and the offense and all of that, how do you find developing chemistry with each other and then maybe even with another line mate? I'm just really interested in your point of view on that.
Well, I think it goes to like when we would do extra skill sessions, we were always doing them together. So I knew the sweet spot that she wanted, like a backdoor pass. I knew where she wanted it. I knew where she wanted her one-timer passes. I can remember a specific goal against, we were playing Ohio State, and we had been working on this drill with our coach, Peter Elander, for a couple weeks. It was because the Sedin twins they would be rounding the net and they'd throw it back once they crossed that midline, and they'd throw it back. And I remember I made a rush pass. I had no idea if I got it in her wheelhouse, and Monique was able to one-time it, but like ended up belly sliding as she shot it. But it was like bar down, one of the hardest shots I ever seen her take. But the only reason we were able to make that play is because we were literally just working on that for the past like 3-4 weeks. So from a chemistry standpoint, like that's a huge piece to it, growing up together. But then our communication, I would say, is like second to none. The amount of talk that we have on the ice with each other, and like, yeah, we threw no look passes, but we knew each other were there because we were letting them know. Like and so I was watching, we were at UND was playing Denver men's hockey this weekend, and I was like, I don't think anyone was talking to the goalie there. So the goalie clearly should have played it up to his forehand side and threw it back on his backhand side. It ended up being fine, but I was like, I don't think anyone was directing the goalie. He doesn't have eyes in the back of his head. So it just made me think, like, the amount of communication in practice and games, like there is nobody that talked on the ice more than us do.
Yeah, I think that was kind of like, people always ask about the chemistry, like they're the obvious, like stating the obvious, but like the amount we communicated, I think was helpful. I think, but what most people don't realize is that I played over half of my games at defense in college. So we didn't even play together for over half of our college career on a line at forward. And so I think to testament to like finding, like, I think at forward, finding line mates with chemistry is a lot different than finding a D partner with chemistry. I think you can still do a lot with your skill set at defense, but if you're having a tough time finding chemistry with line mates, it's a lot harder to be successful as a forward. But yeah, we didn't play together for over half our college career, but when we were playing together, we made a concerted effort to make sure our line mate was like included, because I think it would be very easy to feel like the third wheel and to feel like, oh, it's just going to be those two, like they're never going to pass me the puck. And I think
especially in the second half of our careers, made a huge effort to make sure that our line mate felt included, felt that they were valued and important on the line, and not just like, because sometimes there would be cases where our coaches were clearly trying to like hide a forward on the line as far as if we were lacking in depth. But yeah, I think that went a long way. So, I mean, I think of like Kelly Panic, who was a first-time Olympian when we were playing the line with her in 2018, and she was awesome and she was confident too. So it was easy for her to step in and play with us. But having that, making sure your line mates feel confident, because there's nothing worse than going back to the bench and having it and like thinking your teammate is like pissed at you because you like might have screwed up or whatever. That's not going to help anybody play better. So
I can't tell you how happy it makes me to hear you guys talk about communication like that. It's something it's like such the like most basic little thing, but it is, I honestly think it is the most important skill. And I call it a skill because it is a skill to have as probably an athlete in any sport, but especially in a game as quick and fast as hockey. And like, I make my players do push-ups in practice if they don't call for pucks. Like, it's such a stupid, like little mundane thing, but it's so important. And I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but Todd Reardon is a Chicago guy, and that's where I grew up, and was a head coach in Washington. And now I think he's the assistant coach in Pittsburgh, maybe. And he was still playing in the NHL at the time. And I was a Bantam, and he came out to one of our practices just for like a skate before he went out to Edmonton where he was playing. And so the coach kind of like brings us all in and says, all right, Todd, like, do you have a last piece of advice before you head off to NHL camp or whatever? And he goes, the most important thing you can do in hockey is talk. And we're all sitting here like, that's your advice? You know, as Bantam, like, okay, like that's not really that cool, Todd. But, and then he was talking about how his D partner was Boris Mironov. So I'm kind of dating ourselves right now, but he would say that like Boris Mironov would not get upset at him about making, you know, a mistake or turning the puck over or whatever. But he said he would literally like try to fight me going back to the bench if I didn't communicate on a puck retrieval. And if he got hit or, you know, whatever it may be. And it was such a great lesson for us to learn. And I'm just so happy to hear you guys say that, because even with all of the twin chemistry that you guys just naturally have, the fact that you say that that's important. I mean, I think it's such a great thing for any kid that's listening to this to hear.
Well, it just makes it so much easier to play a quick game. I mean, you think about like if a D is going back to retrieve a puck and they've got someone like four checkers right on them, like, if no one's letting him know to wheel it or reverse it, like he's actually got to look to see, okay, what do I got to do here? Which takes a little bit longer. Or like
when you're on a breakout.
If you're getting a rimmed puck on the breakout and the center is just swinging up the middle and doesn't say chip or direct or, you know, whatever it is. And it's like, it literally, it's another second that it takes to get your head up, find where the open is, and then make the play instead of you can just make it off of first touch.
Yeah, for sure. All right, good stuff. So I want to move on here, and I want to ask you guys about the 2018 Olympics. Obviously had to have been such an amazing moment for you guys and your team. And the one specific moment that I want to ask you guys about, because we've had Nick on the podcast, we had Kendall Coyne Schofield on the podcast, and they both talked about during the gold medal game against Canada, going into the locker room in between the second and third period and the atmosphere of the locker room in between periods, and how there was just like this quiet confidence and everybody was like, there's no chance we're losing this game. But in a way, we're just like, everybody was so kind of together in themselves. And it was just a really cool moment that both of them talked about on our podcast. And I wanted to ask you guys about that because, you know, like, Monique, you scored the goal to tie the game up. And then Jocelyne, you had the unbelievable shootout goal to win it. So like for you guys, take us through that, like from in between the second and the third period and just the feeling of the room. I'm getting kind of chills just even talking about this right now because it was so cool. I can't imagine what you guys feel like. But then, you know, you guys being huge parts of actually tying and then winning the game as well. How was that?
Well, I think like having been to two Olympics previous to that and losing both gold medal games, I think for us and our veterans, it would have been really easy to go into the locker room being down 2-1 and been like, here we go again, like, and have that mindset. But it was such like the demeanor compared to 2014 to 2018. It was just like, it was night and day difference. Like the stress, there like we knew the pressure was on us, but we didn't feel stressed about it. Everyone just kind of went about their normal routine. No one like had like some big spiel to try and pump anybody up.
Yeah,
there
was no fake enthusiasm.
Yeah, it was just everyone, like, I can't remember. I think Decker might have said something, but it wasn't like over the top or like she's like or like someone was overcompensating at any point. But we just kept our normal routine. Haley Skarupa played her normal like songs that we went out to before going on the ice. Everybody had their normal handshakes, and we left the locker room in the same order as we always did. It was just this like quiet confidence that the group had, because we played well in the back half of the second period and thought we were carrying the play. And so I think we just went on the ice like, hey, we're gonna find a way to tie this game up. We're gonna find a way to win it. And it was just like not a whole lot needed to be said. And our coach, I have no idea what our coaches said, but we just, I mean, it's cool that they talk about it in the same way that we talk about it, because I think it was just like this collective togetherness and just this unspoken confidence that the whole group had.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool. And I have to imagine, and we'll get into this kind of next year, but like with all of the crap that you guys went through in the previous year in standing up for women, just like how awesome was that to win gold? Like it just must have been like stupid question, host man. Like, I mean, it's just the obvious one, but like literally like how cool was that to after everything to win?
Yeah. I mean, I think leading into 2017 and that world championship, and then the adversity that our entire team faced kind of going into that Olympic year. I think the reason, to be honest, we were just able to stay the way we did in the locker room and not get too stressed is because we had dealt with adversity before. And so we trusted the person next to us to just do what we had been doing. And we were playing really well that game. So it wasn't like we were playing poor and being outplayed. We were out shooting them. We were out chancing them. So it was just a matter of just sticking to what we were doing in that game and stick to our strengths. And we felt like, okay, just keep doing what we're doing. One's going to fall here.
That's awesome.
And then, yeah, I mean, to get to your actual question, to win, I mean, it's a dream come true. It's something we've been chasing basically our whole lives.
Very, very cool. Well, let's talk about, because a lot of what you guys have added to the game is this fight for gender equity within USA Hockey, and you guys have been at the forefront of that. We had Kendall. It's funny, like we had Kendall. She was our first actual guest on this podcast. So she was the first interview that we did, and we kind of got into it, and it was really funny because what's that?
You get hot, you get heated.
Love it. But it was funny because so we had her on and we were talking about the fact that, you guys had threatened to boycott going to the World Championships and all of the kind of just miscommunication and backdoor stuff that was going on. And USA Hockey is an old boys club. There's no question about it. I don't think I'm out of turn in saying that. And you guys saw that firsthand. But it was interesting because after Kendall's podcast, I actually had a couple guys at USA Hockey that were kind of familiar with what was going on, probably hearing things secondhand, but they were like, man, that was actually really good to hear her perspective about that, because you get fed certain information and then you think a certain way, and that's not how things end up getting resolved. But, you guys, where did you learn the strength to stand? Like, that's not easy to stand up for yourselves in a way, to stand up to your governing body and say, treat us better, treat us equally, or else we're not going to do our job. We're not going to go. I think it's amazing. I have two daughters. I hope and wish that, they have mentors like you that can help them to stand up for what they believe in. And hopefully my wife and I can instill the values in them to do the same things that you guys did. But number one, that couldn't have been easy. And so how did you guys collectively, because I think that the other thing that was really cool about it was that you guys stood your ground together. Like the professional players, the U22, the U18s, you all were like, this is not right. And, some of the younger players could have easily been like, ooh, this is my shot to go play at a World Championships. I might not be ever be able to do that again because all the top players aren't going to do it. But you all stood together. So number one, where did you learn the strength, and where did you learn that kind of fight to stand up for yourselves? And number two, how cool was it that everybody banded together, and you guys ended up changing the lives of a lot of women that are going to be within USA Hockey in the future.
Well, I think the biggest, like for us individually, like we grew up with 4 older brothers, and if we didn't stick up for ourselves, like no one else is going to.
So you learned that at the dinner table.
Exactly. Like for example, if you wanted front seat at the car, it was a competition in our household. Like everything was a competition. If you wanted something, you had to stand your ground. But I think the reason we were able, or I know the reason we were able to do what we did, was because it wasn't about the individual, and it wasn't about how do I get myself more. I think when it becomes about that, that's when you aren't able to stick together, because everyone's going to have their own individual reasonings for doing what they want to do. And so from the get-go, it was always about how do we support the players as a whole. It wasn't about getting the top players paid more or anything like that. It was about how do we support the player pool? How do we support the players, not just financially, but I mean, there's a financial component to it, but how do we support the program? How do we get more support for the U18 and the U22 team? How do we grow the sport? And so it was very little talk about what's in it for me. I mean, we all knew we were going to benefit from it immediately, but ultimately, I mean, we've been on the national team for 14 years. We were under contract for 3 years. And that's as long as we were under contract for. The next generation is going to benefit so much from the groundwork and the foundation that was laid. But that's why we were able to do what we did, because it wasn't about the individual at all. And that's why we got the support we did.
Yeah. And I think if people thought, or the opinion was we were coming from a greedy or a selfish place, then players would have wanted to take our spots, and people wouldn't have supported us like they did in the media. Or, I mean, these like NHL PA, NFL PA, NBA PA, MLB PA, like all of those all those organizations came out and supported us publicly. And so I think if it was coming from a place other than where we were coming from, we wouldn't have had that support. And I think of when we tell the story and we talk about it in our book, like right the night before we announced that we were boycotting the World Championships, our dad was like, well, what if they replace you and now you're not going to go to Worlds and you might jeopardize your opportunity to play in the Olympics? Like, then what? And Jocelyne was like, well, I can lay my head on my pillow at night knowing that we're doing the right thing. And it was like as simple as that. And I think that resonated with so many people, because like when we're talking about compensation, we're not asking to get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. We were just asking to get paid enough so we weren't working a full-time job on top of being an elite athlete, or getting the same amount of per diem that the men's team was getting, so we'd be getting the same amount, or getting like something as stupid as a world championship ring, like getting our rings in a timely fashion, or getting them at all. Like things like that, I think even though they seem small, they add up to a lot at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Vex. So your guys' TED Talk was awesome. Before getting on here, I got the chance to watch that. And so you guys, I think at the time, maybe it was 5 world championships or 6, I can't remember. But you'd only gotten 1 ring, and it's like, really? Like, come on. And it's just, it's absolutely
still an ongoing issue.
Oh, geez, of course. But so I want to ask you, because, you know, this isn't just a USA Hockey issue. This is a global issue for equity. And I'm wondering for you guys, like, how did you get everybody together to get on the same page so you were able to come in united to stand your ground? And if you had advice for those out there that might be listening in business or in education or anywhere else where there's gender inequality, what would be some advice that you would give to women that are fighting for those kinds of rights as well?
I think, what was the first part of the question now? I was
Getting everybody.
getting everyone together. So I had reached out to Julie Foudy right away.
Okay.
We started communicating with our lawyers, and because John Langle, who was the lead lawyer at the time, had worked for the U.S. soccer team, U.S. women's soccer team for 15 or 16 years. And so John just said that I think this would be a good resource for you guys from a player standpoint. And so from the beginning, from the first conversation, she said, you need to get everyone on board. Because the women's team, soccer team had gone through a similar situation where they had boycotted a trip to China, and they were able to send like a backup team, but not near what the national team would be. And so she from the beginning was like, you don't just need your team, your roster team, you need the player pool, and you're going to need the younger teams because that will be the first people they call. And so in today's day and age with social media and how easy it is to get people on the phone, they quickly bypassed the U22 team. I think called some U18 players, didn't even bother with the entire roster, and then went to basically all American-born D1 college players, and then eventually made it to D3 college players, and then they were calling club players. They were calling literally Wednesday night beer league players, like not joking, not exaggerating. But our message was consistent throughout the entire 2 weeks. And they couldn't replace us. And what you mentioned earlier in the interview with like, that's someone else's dream come true, is to go put the red, white, and blue on. Mm-hmm. And we love to share this. It was the Harvard assistant coach. Their team had been knocked out of playoffs in the NCAA season. Their players were on spring break. And so she makes a joke out of it, like, not sure they'd want her players because they're out on spring break right now. But at the end of it, she wrapped it up with, the pride is not in putting on the Team USA jersey. The pride is in saying no to this opportunity. And that's what she sent to her players. So to have that type of support, and for coaches to acknowledge that, I think it just, like, it gives me chills just sharing that, because there's so many different stories like that, but it's just like embodies what it was all about.
How did you guys get everyone to that point? Did you put out a video and send it to every college coach, or was it like an Instagram social media thing and everyone just saw it throughout the female hockey population? How did that work?
Well, so the veteran group that we had, or like our committee of player, I think it was like 9 of us, like the communication was like, it was, that 2 weeks was chaotic to say the least. But when we quickly realized that they were bypassing our entire player pool, basically, there was a group of us, like, hey, we took Division I, so we split up the college teams and the leagues, and we're like, hey, I know these coaches from this league, so we split it up accordingly. It was in the morning. I think we were supposed to be getting out on the ice to train. We're on the phone in the parking lot with our lawyers and our leadership group, and we're like, hey, amazing, we had to get these calls in. So then we were like, hey, we're going to skate for like 45 minutes because we're still training as if we're going to Worlds. And so I think we were on the ice for like 30 minutes, and we're like, hey, we got to make these calls, because we kept checking our phones and we were just distracted. But we're calling college coaches, sending out emails. And then it was, I think, like one of the stories, it was, I don't know, I can't remember what night of the week it was, but the NWHL was playing. So it was a Friday night. So Jocelyne, Kendall, and I were like the only ones available that night. And we found out they were calling Division III players. And so the 3 of us, getting Division III emails and contacts is a lot harder as far as like getting on websites and everything than Division I. We found that out pretty quickly. But we put together an email list, got all the contact information for all the coaches, and we sent out an email to all these coaches on a Friday night. The 3 of us just like hunkered down in our houses and getting all this information out. And so that's how we tackled it. And then we would be on social media, and there was a tweet that was going out for like players that had been contacted but had said no. And there was this generic tweet that players were putting out. So we would find out that players had been contacted through that as well. So then we would contact those players, and then we'd get like more contact information, and we would thank them and appreciated their support. And so it was chaotic, but it was a stressful 2 weeks.
Can you imagine, like, Vex? Can you imagine? So we're sitting here talking to like two of the top women's players of all time, and they are in parking lots before their training sessions fighting for equality. Like, imagine that ever happening to Sidney freaking Crosby or any man at this capacity of sport. I mean,
well, like we were still working too. Like we were working as strength coaches,
jobs.
so we had jobs that we were going to. Like Casey Bellamy was coaching at Merrimack, Megan Duggan was coaching at Clarkson at the time. So like all this is going on, and we still have the rest of our lives that are continuing on as well on top of all that. So it's just, yeah.
You got snakes in the grass calling every female hockey player above 16 years old trying to take your spots too. Grow up.
Well, let me ask you guys this, because again, like getting the chance to read some articles that have been written about you guys over the past couple of weeks since you've announced your retirement, and you know, just some of that kind of stuff. Like the reception that you got from the women's hockey community and more was seems like it was pretty awesome afterwards. What you guys did, it struck a chord and it made an impact on so many people. You know, you hear the story about Dave Hackstall's daughter, who was 11 years old, who had a newspaper clipping. By the way, quick, like Dave Hackstall, I don't know him that well, but coaching in college, like, is he one of like the best guys ever?
He's awesome. We're family friends with his wife, and like we've grown up knowing their whole family. Yeah, he's probably hard to get a smile for people that he's not super close with.
So I have to tell you a story. So every year, so I was an assistant coach at Cornell for a while. So the fact that you told a positive story about Harvard on this podcast, we're going to have to strike that, and I'll get that out in editing. But so I was like a first year coach, and we go down to the convention in Florida every year, you know, where all the coaches go down and do the meetings and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, Coach Hackstall, he finds me, I'm just kind of walking by him, and he's Dave Hackstall, right? So I'm kind of walking by, kind of like shy or whatever. And he says, Topher? And I'm like, yeah. So he like knew me. And then he goes, hey, I just want to let you know, I remember watching you play when you were younger. I'm so happy that you're getting into coaching. I love the way that you played and like the passion that you played with. And we need more people like you in the game. I was on cloud nine, like to get a compliment from him like that. What's that?
Did you trip and fall in the pool after?
Probably. Yeah. And I didn't even have any drinks in me at the time either. So, but no, it was just like a really cool thing. And it shows you the type of guy that he is. Like, he didn't have to do that, you know, like I'm a nobody. And there are certain people, very few, but there are certain people in the business who are kind of like, yeah, I'm the man for being in this position or whatever. But it was just really cool. But going back to it, so, you know, his daughter with the newspaper clipping, thanking you guys at 11 years old. There was a story about right after, I think you guys had threatened to boycott and everything got fixed. You were out to dinner with your husbands, and the waiter comes over, and on the bill, he writes a note saying, thank you for what you did. Going into these different arenas with the PWHPA and specifically at the World Championships in 2017, and just seeing all the signs about just women empowerment, and like, what did that mean to you guys, knowing that you made an impact on so many people? Like, if you think back to being in the parking lot, you know, being on Twitter and all the crazy crap that you guys had to deal with, was it pretty validating to see the kind of impact that you had on these women and girls?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why you do it, is because you're making a difference for other people. And I think some of the more impactful interactions we've had is like when we've gone and done like some corporate speaking events or doing autograph sessions, and it's grown women that come up to you and appreciate what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, everyone knows like you're trying to do better for the next generation, so they don't have to fight the same battles that you did. But when you have grown women that are definitely like way older than you, they're like, thank you for what you did. Like, I think those are some of the more, like when you have those one-on-one moments and intimate moments with people like those, I think what really stick out to you, and what, like, you just realize, okay, what we did was the right thing. And it just solidifies that it was like, there was no other option than to do what we did. Yeah. And I think winning gold in 2018 is like the cherry on top. But when obviously retiring this past week, and Seeing a lot of nice messages from coaches and teammates and opponents. It just makes you realize at the end of the day what truly matters and what has a lasting impact. And yes, our role individually, the roles that we played individually in the 2018 gold medal game were important, but that's not really what most people were talking about. And so I think that's the moment we're most proud of, because we know that that's going to change the game for every girl that wants to play hockey in the US, and it's going to change women's hockey globally.
Yeah, I think that the reception that, especially since we've announced our retirement, some of the amazing things that our teammates have said, friends and just, or opponents and coaches, like those are the things that are important to us. Like, yeah, stats and goals and all that, those are important. What we worked for as athletes to be elite hockey players. But at the end of the day, for us, and I hope for a lot of people, it's the character and how you carried yourself throughout the process to being great. Like that's what truly matters to us at the end of the day. Because like we're not sitting here with like, our medals collect dust. They sit in a shelf, or they're like in a sock right now somewhere around the house. Like that's not what's important to us. And so I think the memories you make with teammates and the difference you've been able to make along the way, that's what truly matters.
Very, very cool. And, just in texting with some of your former teammates and coaches that I know before this, it was like, just to kind of get some information, it was basically like, as great as they were as hockey players, their impact is going to be felt a lot more than what they did on the ice. So I'm sure you guys have gotten a lot of those notes, like you said, and I certainly did too. And as a young father of two girls that are under 4 years old right now, I mean, I get a little bit emotional just kind of hearing you guys talk, because, as men, we don't sit in your guys' shoes. And we don't have to fight for certain things that you guys have had to fight for. And I can just think of my girls, who I love more than anything in the world, like, not having the same opportunities that I did, and how much that makes me upset. And the fact that you guys are making a better world for them when they get of age, and not even necessarily just in hockey, but just your example and fighting for what you believe in and whatever they choose to go into. It gives me a lot of comfort as a young dad. So we really appreciate all the work that you guys have done. Before we let you go, do have to ask you about your book, because you have a book coming out here, and it's called Dare to Make History, Chasing a Dream and Fighting for Equality. Must have been a pretty big undertaking for you guys. Now that it's finally here, now that it's coming out, you get to share a lot of your stories, get to share a lot of, I'm sure, your ups and your downs throughout your career, both on the ice and off the ice. How excited are you guys to finally get this thing out, and what are some of the things that readers can expect to hear from you guys?
Yeah, we're very excited to finally have it hit shelves. It's a long process writing a book, and as first-time authors, like when you're starting with 0 pages, it's pretty daunting. And like the rest of our life, we pretty much approached it like training. Like we had our deadlines, and we're like, hey, this is what we need to do up to here. This is what we need to do up to here. And we just like kept plugging away, and eventually you have a book. But the process of writing was very, we're going back to childhood. So it was very reflective, and we really enjoyed that process. And so we're excited to share our journey, how different experiences in our life have impacted us. And we talk about the gold medal game. We talk about the negotiations and the threatened boycott, but we also talk about, yes, the ups, but the downs, because nobody wants to hear how great your life was and how easy everything was. And we've had our share of adversity, and we think that's important to share, because no one ever has it totally easy, even if it appears that way. And what people know about our hockey careers, if you're a hockey fan, you're aware that we've played on the national team for several years. If you're a sports fan, you probably know our names from just the 2018 gold medal game. But what's the most important is not just the tip of what people see. It's the journey on getting there, what it takes to get there. We've definitely had our successes, and we've had more failures. And so we share that throughout the book, and we're excited and hopefully hopefully inspire not just girl hockey players, but boys, girls, doesn't matter if you're an athlete, parents, adults. We think it's kind of for everyone.
Very, very cool. Well, thank you guys for everything that you do for the game of hockey. Such amazing careers, and we know that you guys will have a lot of success in whatever ventures you guys have. I should ask you too, before we let you guys go, you're both moms now.
Yep.
And again, I have 2 little ones, so you guys are right in the thick of it. You know, having kids now, has that given you more perspective on some of the things that you've been able to accomplish off the ice, you know, and because you guys all talk about the next generation, every woman that we've brought on here to talk about these kinds of things, it's always about the next generation. And that's why we have so much respect for what you guys are doing. Having kids now, does that even kind of put an even bigger exclamation point to it?
I think absolutely. I mean, as an athlete, I think when you're chasing a dream or you're playing at elite level, I think you're inherently selfish because you're always, okay, what am I doing for training? What am I doing to be the best I can be? And when you have a kid, it's not about you anymore, and it never will be. So you learn that pretty quickly. But I think we both have boys 6 weeks apart. But then since the Olympics, I think there's been like 9 grandkids in our family, or soon to be 9 have been added in the last like 2 years. And I'm having another boy in 3-4 weeks. So we're
Congrats.
Yeah, you can't see the belly right now. But I think like our brother, he has 2 young girls that are 1 and 2. Yeah, 1 and 2. They're close in age. And he runs hockey camps. He's like, I want to be able to provide opportunities for them, and then us like having boys. We also want to. It's not. Yes, we're passionate about gender equity, but it's not just a female problem, not just a female issue. It's an everyone's issue, and so I think also raising our boys to realize like what's fair and what's not fair. And if you see something that's unequal or something that's unjust, like you got to step up and speak up, because sometimes other people aren't going to speak up for themselves or stand up for themselves. And so I think teaching them those lessons is extremely important to us.
Awesome.
So let me say this too, for any of the women listening or any hockey players listening, I creeped your guys' Instagram. You guys put up a lot of really, really cool content showing how you train, why you train, you talk about it. Like, it's very informative. I'm all about people following people on Instagram, social media, instead of just following half naked butts or memes or dance.
Yeah, we don't put those up there.
All these things where kids just waste their time and they wonder why they're not getting better. And you can use social media to help you become whatever it is you want to be. And you 2 are really good follows on Instagram. So for any hockey players, male or female, looking how to train in a smarter, harder, more specific way, follow them on Instagram. I would definitely urge you to do that, because I was learning a lot from watching your guys' stuff.
We could come back on here and just talk training, because we love talking shop.
Love that.
We'll hold you to that. That would be awesome. Well, great stuff. Thank you guys again so much for taking the time out of your day to do this. The book is Dare to Make History, Chasing a Dream and Fighting for Equality. When is it out, and where can people find it? I'm sure probably everywhere.
It comes out on February 23rd, and you can order on Amazon, Target online right now, and basically your local bookstore. So you go support local, I think right now, especially see if your local bookstore is carrying it, but if not, Amazon.
They can order it for you too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.